Right, Richard, it's time for you to come in and scare us again. So, Richard Steenan, who is one of our regulars, where we're trying to get Dan Lorman, but Dan's traveling today. We're going to have the dynamic duo on. So, one of the things that really caught my eye over the weekend was I was reading some New York Times articles and I forwarded them on to Richard. As we all know, there's a situation in the Ukraine where the Russians are already uh, doing cyber attacks and whatnot, and that's already begun. I know they're defacing Ukrainian websites and doing other things, and I'm sure that's just the beginning. But one of the things that really perked me up was the what will Putin do next when the West responds kind of thing. And one of the articles I read said the Russians already have malware in all of our grids in different places, and it could turn ugly fast. So I wanted Richard to kind of explore that, not so much what's going to happen in Ukraine. That's not what this show is about. But what is Putin, what could Putin do, I should say, here in the United States if this gets into one of those tit for tat kind of things?
Well, that's an interesting way to put it, Mike. Yeah, so I watch it, of course, because I'm interested in anything to deal with cyber war, because I've written a couple of books on the topic. Went to school to study warfare, and of course, at school it was all about the Cold War. And I want you to first cast your mind back to what the Cold War was all about from a military perspective, right? We had a standoff because of nuclear armaments. Everybody built their nuclear triad, which would be just so devastating that the two great powers, the United States and the Soviet Union, would not engage in a traditional war because it could escalate for any reason into a nuclear war, and then life as we knew it would be over. We had lots of proxy wars, Vietnam being the most disastrous for us going on, but never any direct confrontation. All of the US and NATO's military planning was for that direct confrontation, and the theater was going to be Eastern Europe, the border between Eastern and Western Europe. And the scenario that the West planned for was the Soviet Union to do a World War II style blitzkrieg, where they would just roll across the terrain and with their massive main battle tanks and take over, as much of Europe as they could grab in a very short period of time. So we sat at that level for about 45 years. And then right before the USSR dissolved, the United States got involved in Desert Storm. Desert Storm, successfully shoved Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. It was massive pre-buildup with infantry, tanks, and air. And the entire engagement lasted 100 hours. And the United States successfully demonstrated a massive land battle with main battle tanks in a theater where they would just roll across and take over an entire country. Now, mind you, it was Kuwait. Nice desert, flat terrain, not exactly what you have in Eastern Europe. The USSR paid a lot of attention to that. Anybody who was, even middle-aged at the time or growing up recognized that the United States has just demonstrated what was required in order to engage in a massive land battle. Putin was one of those people. Obviously he was young. What is this, 40 years ago? But he knew about that, and he, took it to heart. That was how the United States demonstrated what you have to do. So now we have massive armament and infantry buildup on the border between Russia and Ukraine. And lo and behold, Putin uses the term technical military response to anything that the West might do to, interfere with them. Technical military was the term that the Russians coined to describe what the US did, because it was technical, right? They had air superiority and they used technical precision guided munitions in order to accomplish what they did. So 4 weeks ago, Putin, in a major speech, referred to technical military. Now, of course, today, technical military also includes cyber attack. So I think the board is set. If Putin were to invade the to the West, it would start with cyber attacks. So the entire world is watching for those cyber attacks. And of course, on Friday, a lot of Ukrainian government websites and a few commercial industries were defaced and shut down, right? Very, very similar to the 2008 attacks against both Estonia or 2007 Estonia, 2008 Georgia, which are, we all classify as intimidation. But today, the New York Times is reporting that in addition to that, or actually they're reporting on what Microsoft discovered, because Microsoft, of course, has sensors everywhere in people's desktops. And they detected a type of malware that's used like a ransomware attack. But it wouldn't be ransomware, it would go ahead and destroy all the data on a lot of endpoints. So they, there's multiple attacks going on computing infrastructure in Ukraine right now. And it's not at the level that I would warn, oh my gosh, an invasion is imminent, right? Because you can use that kind of attack for intimidation as well as anything else. But the repercussions or the eventuality is that when an invasion occurs, they will actually take out the power grid that you were talking about, but it won't target the United States, right? Because they, just like during the Cold War, they will not want to engage the United States. The secret to winning any battle is not to have a major power in the battle against you. The secret is to keep them, just confused and in the dark and not sure what to do, and resorting to diplomatic and economic pressure to punish, extreme punishments. The Senate and administration are talking about extreme repercussions economically if they did this. If you take over a country that has, a multi-trillion-dollar GDP, then maybe you don't have the economic concerns, the trade-off happening, right? It doesn't matter if the United States sanctions them yet again if they have the complete output of the brand new country that they just took over. So look for the types of attacks that we saw against Ukraine coming from Russia, and specifically the GRU, the military intelligence unit that took out Ukraine's power in 2015 and 2016. And, and that will be the sort of thing that we can expect to be happening. If that happens, if they take it out in a way that is similar to NotPetya, which was the most devastating cyber attack ever, also targeted at Ukraine, but NotPetya leaked out of Ukraine, right? It was targeted at Ukrainian organizations, but it was a worm. So it spread all over the world and shut down Maersk and TNT, which is a part of FedEx, I believe. Just devastating, cost hundreds of billions of dollars for individual companies to recover from. So that's what we're going to see. If there's major, cyber incursion like that, it will trickle over to the entire world, right? The internet itself could have troubles staying up or staying stable. Major providers like AWS and Google could have tremendous issues. And once again, if there's a worm that's specifically taking out power grids, that could easily spread around the world, and we would see power outages here. We would be collateral damage to a act going on in Eastern Europe. Sorry, I think that's the longest I've ever talked on your show.
No, you did well, Matt.
Well, I think it was 9 minutes. If something like that was to happen, I mean, how would that be repaired? What would the repairs consist of, and how long would it take to get things back up and running?
Yeah, so all the computer stuff, we can recover from quickly, right? The major computer providers, Google and Microsoft, et cetera, have not ever experienced an outage that lasts more than a couple of days. So I think, we could get back to Facebook and Twitter and the other things that we do pretty quickly. a attacks on the power grid, if they actually cause physical damage, a lot longer. Weeks of intermittent power outages, brownouts, grayouts. Here in Detroit, we're very familiar with just how long those can go on after a major ice storm. But it won't be power lines down, but it will be transformers and power generation stations that get damaged. There's always been a concern. I'm not sure just, if this is really the case, but there are particular transformers that are only built in China and India, and we do not have a adequate backup supply of them. And if those transformers are taken out, it could take 10 months to replace them. But, from what I know of power engineering, we could just bank a couple of smaller transformers together and replace them to get us back online.
And if that should happen, I'm pretty sure that's why I wanted to have Dan, former NSA guy, on the show, that the U.S. has pretty similar capabilities that they could do similar damage to Russia, but they, of course, there would be this deniability. Oh, we didn't do it, as these darn black hats said we can't control it. Like, but everybody knows that's not really, nothing happens in Russia that Putin doesn't sanction, right?
Right.
So, U.S. has those capabilities. Would it then the U.S. turn around and say, all right, Russia, you want to play hardball? Here it comes.
I don't think it would in a retaliatory way, but it would to disrupt, Russia's actual military advances, right? So they would do it while it was going on against Ukraine. It could happen in Moscow, and so then that truly would be the first cyber war, because now you'd have two sides fighting it. And I agree with you. The NSA, they're just signs that they actually have eyes on all the time, and the Russians don't actually surprise them when they do things. It's just the classical intelligence conundrum. Do you stop a bad thing from happening because you know it's going to happen and you know how to stop it and you can warn people, or do you let it happen because you don't want the bad guys to know what they're doing? And then, intelligent, or history of spies going back over 100 years is full of stories like that, right? We've broken their code, but we can't take a certain action because then they'll figure out that we broke their code, and they'll change their code, and we won't be able to hear what they're doing.
Yeah, during World War II, the Brits had the German secret codes, but they didn't want the Germans to know about it. And I read some stories where they knew that some submarines were going to be attacking convoys, and they didn't alert the convoys because they didn't want the Germans to know they'd cracked their code, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So a whole bunch of people die, and that may, in retrospect, have been the right thing to do, just to win the war ultimately.
Yeah. Matt?
Well, one of the things that I keep reading about is that we would somehow keep the Russians out of the international monetary system or the international financial system. Is that even possible these days, or does that sort of thing go on under the table electronically and you kind of can't stop it?
Yeah, for regular commercial activity, for sure, we can make it a lot harder for Russian banks, and therefore anybody in Russia, to receive money by cutting them off from the SWIFT network. They've started to build a replacement for it. I've seen Dmitry Pelovich, the founder of CrowdStrike, say we shouldn't cut them off because that just it'll give more prominence to their replacement. More people will adopt it. But that is a tool in the toolbox to use against Russia. So, hurt them economically by shutting off their access to SWIFT. Now, if you've ever done banking here in the United States, especially in Michigan, sorry, I'm going to rant. It's quite likely that you have a bank that doesn't do SWIFT, and you can't transfer funds or receive funds from overseas. And it's very, very frustrating. But all modern banks do, and all modern banks outside the United States certainly are participating in the SWIFT process.
Okay. So certainly a dangerous situation. No one knows what Putin's going to do, and from what I've heard and read from Putin watchers, is that's the way he likes to keep it. Everyone guessing as to what the heck he's going to do. Right?
Yeah, it's I've always challenged myself when you see these things happening to just continuously predict, what is going to happen. And at least I've done that for 20 years. Um, and it's extremely expensive to move all of your main battle tanks to your southwestern border. They're all parked in big parking lots. And then DFER, who is an Atlantic Council research group, have just reported that Russia is moving a lot of their ballistic missile systems, just the tactical ones, all the way from the east coast of Russia, so north of Mongolia. They're moving them all the way west to the battlefront. That's pretty strong signal that they need all of their equipment in one place. Mind you, China's probably looking at that going, really? You're taking all of your arms and tanks and people and you're moving them away from our border. This might be our chance to get back a little of ours.
Wouldn't that be interesting? That the old two-front war. Where have we seen that before?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's anybody who's, well, heck, we're not old enough to remember what happened in World War II directly, but we've all studied it.
Yeah.
And it seems like the transition from World War One to World War II in retrospect is pretty obvious what was going to happen next. And because the resolution of World War II was to leave two great powers, facing each other, we thought we'd resolve that in 1991 when the USSR dissolved. We blundered. We didn't follow up on our advantage, right? We had replaced the architect of it, you could argue, was Ronald Reagan. We'd replaced it with, a former CIA director who just lost the peace windfall, right? He totally stood down, disarmed. Everybody was happy. NATO disarmed. Germany just tore down all their defenses. We just set the stage for the next time around.
Yeah. All right. Well, certainly, I know discussing what is Putin's final agenda is probably beyond this conversation because we're really focused on technology. So, what other scary things are out there that we can expect to see in 2022?
But we have yet to see the total repercussions from the end of the year Christmas presents, which was a vulnerability in open source libraries for logging. So the log4j vulnerability. Turns out it's everywhere, and it gives an attacker complete access to a system that's running it. So, just millions and millions of devices, servers, security devices that are vulnerable. And while the good companies, those that practice good security, have the capability to call all hands on deck and fix it, as we know, there are many more companies that don't have good security practices, and they're the ones that are going to continue to succumb to ransomware attacks, just breaches and theft of their information. And it's the gift that keeps on giving if you're in the cybersecurity industry. I want to point out last year, and this is new and breaking news on your show, that total investment in cybersecurity companies last year was $26.4 billion.
Huh.
The year before is just over 10 billion.
Wow.
So more than doubled last year.
So
that's
companies are finally getting it that they've got to beef that up, and it's not just a cost center, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Some are actually, when I go through to create the directory for Security Yearbook, which I made available for pre-order today. You'll be able to get it May 25th. When I go through that, I have to filter out companies and more this year than ever before, because they talk about security in their marketing literature and their webpage, etc. And you think, oh, they're a security company, but no, they're a company that offers some product or service in a secure way. So they're not somebody I'd be interested in, but they use end-to-end encryption for, file transfer or comms, or doing your Slack channel stuff. And it's kind of heartening to see that. Pretty soon I won't be able to tell the difference between a security company and just a company that's doing it securely.
Matt?
All right. What do you see in the headlines lately in terms of cyber threats? I mean, are we still looking at ransomware being the #1 issue, or are there other things emerging?
Yeah, ransomware is definitely the #1 issue. We'll see, because I'm sorry, we're back to Russia, but Russia arrested the REvil team. Rather graphic videos they've put up of them, arresting all the guys. It looks like they're in drug dens of gangs, because there's money everywhere. Not a lot of weapons. Young kids being handcuffed and hauled away. And they were responsible for the vast proportion of the big ransom attacks and ransom demands. And it was something that Putin and Biden discussed in the summer. And I think, and everybody's trying to figure out, well, why is he doing this now, right? He's, with one hand, he's threatening, a war, and the other hand, he's actually complying with our requests. So it's kind of hard to figure out what's happening there. But hopefully, we'll see a lull in major ransomware attacks over the next 4 months before somebody picks up the mantle and fills the void that they left behind.
Well, there's so much money involved that somebody's going to do that. It's just a question of who and when, right?
Yeah, billions of dollars. It's amazing. I'm working on writing a book on ransomware negotiation. So I'm getting exposed to, from the main person the book's going to be about, I'm getting exposed to all these amazing stories and just how the actual nitty gritty of interacting with the ransomware people occurs. Because it's real, they're real automated. They've got call centers to call into. They've got tiers of people that do the negotiation. They usually settle for a lot less than they demand. But there's still got to be that way to pay them. So companies are now being advised, even by their insurance companies, to have a store of Bitcoin lying around, so they're ready to pay a ransom. Because if you've tried it, it's really difficult to actually get into owning some Bitcoin. At least it is for me. But if you need $1 million worth of Bitcoin, that could be, it's not very liquid, despite the fact that it's supposed to be. So it may take several days to accumulate that much Bitcoin.
Yeah. All right. Anything else out there on the horizon that you want to warn business about?
Yeah. So one thing that they should be looking at is API security. So it turns out, as the internet grew and we all moved to the cloud, we've got all these cool applications, and we had to wire them all together so they could talk to each other. So you launch one app, and you might need transaction data from QuickBooks or something like that. So rather than program all these system calls like we used to do it, both sides create, or the app itself, they create a application program interface that uses pretty much HTML to get stuff. And now all I have to do is, send it a message and ask for particular fields in the database or whatever you're looking for, temperature of the day, whatever. And they send you back the information all through APIs. I've seen data that 65% of internet traffic is actually APIs. So it's applications talking to each other, exchanging information, which is cool. You know, we've got this data ecosystem going on. But once again, the people who develop those, you know, really smart engineers and developers do not think about the security of it, because they say, look, you know, we're just connecting our app that's a private app, nobody knows about it, to somebody else's private app that nobody knows about. So who the heck is going to hack it, right? It's like, they can't hack us because we're just giving them stuff anyways. So why would they hack us? Which is a classic formula for how to set yourself up for a cyber attack. So now we've got, you know, millions of machines, devices, applications that are engaging in API conversations, and none of it's been secured. So that's, you know, last year of all the startups I tracked, that was one of the most frequent problems that they targeted, was how to secure those API things. And once again, you've got, you know, proactive measures that do authentication for API, tokenization. You got to have a digitally signed token before you can get certain piece of information. But tons that look at just scanning your network traffic and identifying what APIs you're using, because that's always the first step. If you want to protect something, is what do you have and what are the vulnerabilities? So we're going right down that path. We did that with IoT security, and now there's I think 108 IoT security companies, and there'll probably someday soon be 108 API security companies.
So that's the hot new thing, is being in API security.
That's the leading edge hot new thing. Now, the other thing I learned from looking at last year's numbers, that last year was the year of security operations, which is a really, really good sign. So, you know, very sophisticated organizations like Lockheed Martin, the FBI, have security operations centers. And it helps to imagine them, you know, the big room with all the screens and the big overhead displays and people responding to real-time attacks as they happen. Of course, post-COVID, they're not in those big rooms together anymore, but still the same people doing the same thing. They're blocking and tackling every single day, 24/7. But a small organization, you know, can't necessarily do that. So there's tons and tons of new tools to help them have their own security operations and to sell to those existing SOCs, as we call them. And that entire industry was of the 16 segments I tracked, grew the fastest last year, over 20% in headcount. So they're hiring. So maybe finally something of interest and direct use to your audience is, you know, if you're a student of security or just thinking of getting into technology, you should know that, hey, that all of these tools and SOCs are growing. So that'd be a good area to focus on. And it's very different from the pen testing that most of our colleges here in Michigan seem to focus on and teach. SOC operations is the other side of it. You know, what do you do when you get an alert that something was, you know, something pinged? Then you have to drill in, figure out what caused it. Is it a real attack or not? We ignore it. Are we vulnerable to the attack? And that's something, you know, that takes a different kind of training, but you should be looking for that. Maybe, you know, get an internship at an existing managed security service provider so that you can address that. It's fun job for a young person, because it's grueling. It's kind of like being a frontline worker in a hospital.
Okay. All right. We're going to have to leave it at that. Now, let's talk a little bit about that hot new product that people can order today, your security yearbook. Do you happen to have a cover shot of it you can show us here?
No, I just put it up. I've got one on my computer, but
okay.
I'd have to share my screen.
All right. So
But
talk
yes,
about that, how much that costs and how they can order that.
okay. So first of all, the Security Yearbook 2020, you can now get for free if you go to my website and just fill out the contact form, and I will send you a free copy if you agree to receive my email updates on the stuff I'm doing. Or you can go to it-harvest.com/shop, and you can buy either the 2020, the 2021 version, or you can pre-order the 2022 version, which comes out May 25th.
And it costs how much?
$54.
Okay. What a value. All right.
Yeah, I decreased the 2021 price to $39. I'm sorry, $49. And the 2020 version is $16. So it's still incredibly valuable if you're new to the industry, or if you want the history of the industry, or to get a feel for all the vendors in the industry. But each year, of course, I update it. So with what happened the year before. So if you want to get up to speed, value goes up with how recent the book is.